Hello, cow mammals, and welcome to another show. This episode is actually going to... Holy shit, that's loud. 1 second. Alright. This episode's actually going to start a little differently with a tiny 5-minute Let's Play. And, yeah, this little Let's Play... this is just a stupid little flash game that I think captures something that I think all of us could benefit from understanding. So, we're just going to go through and do each step of it. And as it goes along, you're going to start seeing a pattern. And, I mean, it's something I'm guilty of just as much as anyone else, being directly influenced and even emotionally driven by the media that we see. So we're just going to step through this little 5-minute Let's Play of a game called We Become What We Behold. Nope, just missed it. If you catch the cricket, you actually get a little bonus, but follow you around. And you may start noticing a little bit of a pattern here as I go along. Paranoid guy. Wait until he runs across somebody of which he will be paranoid. And now the square is disillusioned. Oh, god damn it, just missed it. You can actually catch the cricket and get more crickets. Alright, where's our little angry square? Squares, stubs, circles. You starting to notice a pattern developing here? That is just too adorable. Do you get anything for that? Oh, god damn it. It's adorable, though, in my opinion, that... Oh, just missed it. Alright. Thank you, Cricket. Let's go. Come on. Please. You starting to notice a pattern here? Well, trust me, it gets better. It gets a lot better from here. I'm not enjoying having all this screaming in my ears, but... You start getting little protesters over here, which I find an interesting little detail. Almost everyone hates everyone. And as things progress, everyone hates everyone. Now Mr. Hat comes along, pulls out a gun. Be scared, be angry. And this is where shit starts to break down in the game. And as the information starts passing along, you start seeing more and more people going slowly insane. And it pulls away from the monitor, revealing a laptop, revealing that this is all being watched externally. It's quite the impressive little simulation of the madness created by the media, and it's not like I'm not guilty of this. I mean, really, I'm just as guilty as anyone else. But this is a game created by Nikki Case, and it can be found on itch.io. And let me get the credits rolling for you, just so that I can give the credit, you know, show off the credits. Fade out that audio and swap over to the camera. Bon locale, and welcome to another episode of 7 at 7, the least watched name in news, where we are going to be talking about some pretty intense shit. However, I honestly thought that we could use a little bit of perspective. I just thought that I could use a little perspective before we got started, because the fact of the matter is I am constantly brought to emotion, to anger, by events that happen in the news, and I don't like being a part of that cycle. However, I also find it important to share information, to make sure that that information is out there, and as such, that little Let's Play serves as just a moment's perspective, mostly for myself, to help me think about exactly what I'm doing while I'm here. So, honestly, we're just going to jump right into the news. There's not much I can say about me. Been a lot of bullshit going to the hospital, going to doctors, getting turned down for Medicaid, getting turned down for assistance, finding out that I need $1,100 just to get a goddamn PET scan in this state, because I don't have insurance. And, well, that is my burden to bear. I will figure out a way through it. I'm also starting work on a game. However, I don't want to really talk about it publicly until I have something better to show off, in the very least, a design document of sorts. And I'm working on that, so look forward to that, and possibly streams in the new year in which I am going through and programming this game, because that's where I'm going. However, we're going to start with the simplest story we have from this week, because this is an ongoing theme on my channel, the theme of Mueller's investigation and the Russia hoax. Michael Flynn, charged with lying to the FBI, set to plead guilty. Special counsel Robert Mueller has charged former Trump National Security Advisor Michael Flynn with willfully and knowingly making false, fictitious, and fraudulent statements to the FBI regarding conversations with Russia's ambassador. Flynn, in turn, is expected to plead guilty in a D.C. court to making false statements to FBI agents in January 2017, according to the court filing presented below. The plea hearing is set for 10:30 a.m. EST. Court filing says Flynn falsely stated he did not ask Russian ambassador to refrain from escalating situation after U.S. had imposed sanctions on Russia. Court filing says Flynn falsely stated he did not recall that Russian ambassador told him Russia had chosen to moderate its response to U.S. sanctions as a result of his request. And court filing says Flynn falsely stated that he did not ask Russian ambassador to delay vote pending UN Security Council resolution, and that ambassador never described Russia's response to his request. Michael Flynn is now the second person involved with the Trump campaign to admit wrongdoing in Mueller's probe into allegations of collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia. He is, however, the first Trump administration official charged in relation to Mueller's probe into Russian interference in the 2016 presidential election. Now, I want you to step back for a minute and think about this, because I want you to take Flynn and Trump out of the equation, because these are very controversial figures in the current political climate, right? Trump, no matter how you look at him right now, is absolutely a controversial figure, so anyone connected to him is going to look badly on him, even if Trump is getting away scot-free, completely uninvolved, completely unrelated. You'll note none of these relationships were for the sake of Trump. However, what if we were to put Hillary Clinton into this? After all, Hillary Clinton, despite sanctions, has repeatedly interacted with the Russian ambassador, has repeatedly interacted with many Russian diplomats and individuals, despite sanctions. If Hillary Clinton had won the election, there's no doubt in my mind that she would have had someone do exactly the same thing. Talk to Russia and try and ease them down to prevent further conflict during the political transition and maintain at least a decent working relationship with Russia for that transitional period. However, due to the fact that it was, supposedly willfully and knowingly making false and fictitious fraudulent statements, which I don't actually believe he did. I believe he made a mistake in his remembering of all of the details. If you go further into the story, you find out that he actually says that he misremembered. He did not recall that subject coming up until later in interviews. Former Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort and aide Rick Gates were charged with money laundering from alleged crimes that took place before they worked with Trump. And a campaign advisor, George Papadopoulos, pled guilty to lying to the FBI earlier this year over contacts with officials connected to the Russian government, who turned out to be Israeli. So that's yet another place where all of this shit is going completely sideways, despite the fact that there was far more collusion between the Trump campaign and Israel. Robert Mueller continues to push this narrative about Russia. The leftist media continues to push this narrative about Russia in attempts to make it look like, I don't even know what, like that America is being sold out from under itself to a country which is completely sanctioned against banking and other forms of business. It just can't happen in that way. After he left the administration, Flynn filed a foreign registration form showing that he hadn't disclosed multiple contacts and payments from foreign entities while serving as a campaign advisor to Trump starting in February 2016. His company, take that to mind, received $530,000 from a Dutch company working on behalf of Turkey's government to lobby the U.S. for extradition of an exiled cleric who had opposed the President Recep Tayyip Erdogan's of Turkey. He also disclosed payments from Russian news site RT, described in an unclassified U.S. intelligence report as the Kremlin's principal international propaganda outlet, which they aren't. There are much larger propaganda outlets, although yes, RT is just as much a propaganda outlet as CNN is a propaganda outlet, and CNN is absolutely a propaganda outlet. The news about Flynn comes a day after CNN reported that Jared Kushner had met earlier this month with Mueller's team as part of the investigation into Russia's meddling in the election, according to two people familiar with the meeting. The question is whether, as part of the plea, Flynn will reveal something about Trump, because if 6 months after the Mueller probe, the best he could get out of Flynn was making a false statement about meeting a Russian ambassador, then Trump has nothing to be worried about. And of course, the content of this is, on or about January 24th, 2017, defendant Michael T. Flynn did willfully and knowingly make materially false, fictitious, and fraudulent statements and representations in a matter within the jurisdiction of the executive branch of the government of the United States. To wit, the defendant falsely stated and represented through agents of the Federal Bureau of Investigation in D.C. that, on or about December 29, 2016, Flynn did not ask the government of Russia's ambassador to the United States to refrain from escalating the situation in response to sanctions that the U.S. ambassador had imposed against Russia that same day. And Flynn did not recall the Russian ambassador subsequently telling him that Russia had chosen to moderate its response, and of course we're just repeating ourselves here. I also want to take note of these dates. December 29th, 2016, that is after the Electoral College agreed on President Trump being the President of the United States. Therefore, this is actually well within the purview of the presidency, of the presidential candidates, to make agreements with other foreign leaders, to begin forming these relationships in order to secure a stable and calm move forward. After months and months of accusations about Russia's involvement in hacking the election, I would not be surprised in the slightest had Trump's campaign or Hillary Clinton's campaign done this, nor would I consider it a crime. Now, of course, it's absolutely a crime to lie under oath. It's absolutely a crime to impede an investigation through dishonesty or even misrepresentation. So Flynn's fucked either way. But this does not mean any backlash is going to come onto Trump. I just needed to get that out of the way because there's just been so much hullabaloo made about it within the media when there's absolutely more important stories to cover. But you can expect that none of them will cover that. For example, there's this story. Israeli missiles targeted strategic Syrian army ammo storage in western Damascus. Now, why the fuck is Israel attacking Syria? That makes 4 nations now involved in the proxy war between Saudi Arabia and Iran on the land of Syria. And when Israel gets involved with something, let's face it, shit tends to go sideways. From Beirut, Al Masdar News has just learned that the Israeli forces fired several missiles towards the 1st Division ammo storage in the western countryside of Damascus. According to military source, several missiles, some of them intercepted by Syrian air defense before they hit the target. However, some missiles did reach their intended target, causing loud explosions between the towns of Keshwa and Sarnaya. Moments ago, another Israeli missile was fired towards the ammo storage, but it was reportedly intercepted by Syrian air defense. And of course, I've got another more in-depth story on the subject. The IDF launched several missiles at a strategic target close to the Syrian capital of Damascus, Israeli and Arab media reported, saying that it was an airstrike. Syrian state TV said military positions were targeted by surface-to-surface missiles. Several missiles were reportedly fired on a target in the countryside south of Damascus, with some intercepted by the Syrian air defense and others hitting the intended target. Arab outlet Al-Masdar News, citing its sources, reported that the target was an ammunition depot of the Syrian army located between the towns of Kishwa and Sina. Loud explosions were heard as the missiles hit their target, the news service said. Other sources, however, claim the target was an alleged Iranian military base in the Kishwa area, some 13 kilometers from the city of Damascus. Reports on the alleged airstrikes in some Israeli outlets were then taken down for several hours. Now, of course, this is coming from RT, and the reason I trust RT in this matter is because Russia has no reason to cover for Israel. So, so long as we're going to be looking at propaganda outlets, we might as well take into account who they would propagandize for. And Russia has no reason to propagandize for Israel, especially when it's Russian boots on the ground and Russian planes in the air over Damascus. The warplanes reportedly launched the missiles from Lebanese airspace. The engagement of Israeli missiles by Syrian anti-aircraft troops was confirmed by some Syrian media, although their reports claimed that they had been fired not by Israeli aircraft, but rather from ground positions. According to the state-owned Al-Ikbariya TV channel, 2 of the missiles were shot down. Videos have emerged on social media purporting to show the moment one of the Israeli missiles was intercepted by Syrian air defense. Israel has previously carried out strikes targeting the Syrian territory, either claiming to be targeting positions of the militant group Hezbollah or retaliating in response to stray projectiles that occasionally cross the border into the Israeli-occupied side of the Golan Heights. However, in early November, an Israeli attack hit a copper factory in the Syrian province of Homs, prompting Damascus to urge condemnation of Israel's actions at the UN. The reason I find this important is that Israel has the single best missile intercept system in the world. A dome, a virtual dome over the country of Israel and many surrounding countries that has, I think, about an 80% accuracy rate. You can't just launch missiles at Israel because they will accurately target them down with their own missiles mid-flight. So for Israel to make statements regarding stray missiles, stray projectiles occasionally crossing the border, well, I mean, they wouldn't even have to cross the border for Israel to be able to successfully intercept them, which makes me wonder why they felt the need to counterattack. I mean, if it was to attack Hezbollah, good on ya. Hezbollah does cause a lot of fucking problems for Israel in general. But just fucking say it, Israel. Just say you're allied with the Sunni side of this proxy war and you're fighting against the Shia side of it, instead of playing this political bullshit game. Israel officials have long accused Iran of trying to establish a military foothold in Syria, where Tehran has been supporting Damascus's fight against ISIS and other terrorists. According to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, however, the goal is using Syria as a base from which to destroy Israel. That I'm not so sure about. Tehran may be very powerful. Iran may be very powerful, but they don't have what it takes to take on Israel, especially with the support of Saudi Arabia, the support of the United States, the support of the UK, the support of all of the greatest nations in the world save Russia. And even Russia is beginning to turn and say, all right, we're going to have a little bit of, agreement with you, Israel, in order to continue winning this war in Syria. And it is quite the fucked up war. It's a proxy war, and it's a proxy war that is costing thousands of lives, tens of thousands of lives each month. And that, of course, brings us to another, the next part of my show, which is going to be super exciting. I mean, just the most exciting shit you can imagine. tax bills. The final tax bill, which was passed early yesterday, has been released. And, come on, load the fuck up. Stop lagging, you piece of shit. There we go. The 2018 tax bill by the Trump administration and the GOP has been released, and despite the disturbing amounts of bullshit that has been spread by media outlets, including the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, this is perhaps one of the best tax bills I have seen in a fucking long time. However, I absolutely need to take the time to call out every bit of bullshit that the New York Times decided to lead with in their opinions on this matter. They called their article "A Historic Tax Heist." With barely a vote to spare early Saturday morning, the Senate passed a tax bill confirming that the Republican leader's primary goal is to enrich the country's elite at the expense of everyone else, including future generations who will end up bearing the cost. This is absolutely bullshit. One, most of the benefits serve those who are in the worst position, with the lowest tax bracket being lowered to 10%, and the second lowest tax bracket being lowered to 12%. This being from 18 and 22% under the Obama administration, a tax level which is actually completely screwed over a good 40% of our country, left 400,000 people without homes despite a 3 million person increase in population. We are down to 63% housed, or with houses, as compared to 69% before Obama took office, at the end of the the housing crisis. And the fact of the matter is, people are going to feel a lot of tax relief, and with that tax relief is going to come indirect benefits to everyone across the board. The approval of this looting of the public purse by corporations and the wealthy, which it's not, is a near certainty that President Trump will sign this or similar bill in the coming days, which he absolutely will be able to. The House is going to argue over it. We're going to see a few riders click onto it. However, what we're going to end up with is going to be pretty much what we have in the so-called tax substitute of House Resolution 1. And, by the way, just to show it off, here's our, if you are not over $19,000, $19,050, your tax is 10% of taxable income. Between $19,000 and $77,000, that is below the small business line, 12% in excess over $1,905 plus 12% in excess over $19,050. And it climbs from there to 22%, 24%, 32%, 35%, and 38.5%, leaving it at some of the best tax rates that I have seen in my lifetime. Tax rates have not been this good since, well, simply put, since before I was born. Not even under Clinton were tax rates this good. Come on, quit being slow. Come on, Firefox, quit being a piece of shit. Oh, god damn it. Firefox is fucking with me, I'm sorry. Don't crash on me, Firefox. Please don't crash on me, Firefox. Oh, Christ. Alright, I gotta close this PDF, apparently. That's the only thing I can think that would be slowing it down. Christ. Alright, let me switch over to the camera. Yeah, I'm not even able to fucking close Firefox. Let me, kill a few things. Task Manager. So sorry about this. Let me give some shout-outs. Alright, thank you, Rick Sheck. Thank you so much. Rick Sheck sends me a super chat. News you can use. Funny, too. Thank you very much. We got, quite a lot of interesting... Oh, this is so awesome. I gotta wait until I get Firefox fucking killed over here. But I'm so thankful, all of you here. Thank you all so much. Nope, that's not the window I wanted to fucking open, you piece of shit. Come on. Go away, go away, go away. I misclicked. Die, Brave. Go away, Brave. Not now. Die. Alright, so you're gonna reload, right? Music's gonna want to start up again. Alright, and I need to bring back up my, my fucking live streaming shit. Sorry about that. Events. Yeah, that's a problem I've been having with Firefox, Nananya, which is seriously unfortunate. The only reason I switched back to it is because it's a lot easier to capture it with, I mean, it's a lot easier for me to capture it with OBS than it is for me to capture, god damn you, than it is for me to capture video of Chrome or Brave, which is just plain frustrating if you ask me. I'll figure it out next episode, but for now we're kind of stuck with Firefox, which, yes, has been open all day, and that's totally my fault. The bill is expected to add more than $1.4 trillion to the federal deficit over the next decade, a debt that will be paid by the poor and middle class in future tax increases and spending cuts to Medicare, Social Security, and other government programs. I want you to take that sentence apart with me for just a second, because it makes no fucking sense. This is Chewbacca on Endor levels of retarded. 1.4... No, go away. 1.4 trillion? That's a lot better than any tax bill under Obama, for one, which tended to be in the ballpark of 4 to 5 trillion each year. Which is why our federal deficit had a criminally grand expansion under Obama. However, here they say this is a debt that's going to be paid by the poor and middle class, which it's absolutely not. It's going to be paid by the middle class, which we don't have a very large middle class right now. However, it is, you know, where most of the tax money is going to come from, other than, you know, large corporations who also have loopholes and whatnot that they can exploit, and you know, people who spend who earn over $1 million. Now, it's going to be paid by cuts to spending, cuts to Medicare, Social Security, and other government programs. No, it's that actually doesn't help with that at all. The reason that it's as low as 1.4 trillion is due to the cuts to Medicare, Social Security, and other government programs, all of which I covered last week, are criminally overbloated and driven into just sheer amounts of deadlock due to the number of problems we have seen with immigration, with illegal use of benefits. I mean, one of the main reasons I can't get help for my own health problems is because the system is completely deadlocked, and applying for benefits right now is just plain suicidal. These cuts are needed not only to bring a stop to the criminal uses and the misuse of Medicare and other government programs, but also to rein in the problems that Social Security have begun to create. And of course, this is going to cause a problem for the elderly. Don't get me wrong. I haven't missed this detail. We are going to see a raise across the next 2 years in the age of retirement due to this. However, at the same time, we are not a country that has a, you know, criminally high retirement rate. The retirement rate age varies from year to year, usually sticking around 62 to 65. We might see it go up to 67, but at the same time, if more people are able to work due to corporations and individuals having lower taxes and being able to access more of their money, employ other people directly or indirectly, and further support the economy from every position and not just the monopolistic grand companies. We're going to start seeing enormous changes in the way lifestyles are led. For the last 10 years, we have seen wealth grow for the top 10%, but shrink rather dramatically for the lower 40%. And despite everyone trying to condemn Republicans for this is entirely the fault of the Obama administration's push to open up and deregulate social services to a point where immigrants, non-citizens, and people who don't need it, including college students, are able to access these benefits when they absolutely shouldn't have access to them, as they are taking this money from the people who need it most, the people who are unable to work, the people who are genuinely disabled, the people who are elderly over the age of 62, the people who need Social Security, Medicare, and state benefits. Its modest tax cuts for the middle class disappear after 8 years, which actually makes sense considering most presidents don't like to set things in motion that will last longer than their excuse me, sorry, my stomach's not doing the best right now. Do better than the perceived length of their campaign. The fact that when Bill Clinton made his social service overhaul in a tax plan in 95, was able to make a plan that lasted, essentially in perpetuity, was an extremely rare change. This was, of course, in response to the way Reagan did things, who also tried to set things in motion in perpetuity in paranoia of what was to come with the fall of the Berlin Wall and the Soviet Union. However, that does not make it the right thing to do. No, you only set things in motion for enough time for them to have the intended effect. And the intended effect here is to free money back up to individuals and small businesses in order to be able to compete. And from everything I've read, and if you want to, you can read the 479-page tax document. It's linked below. I'm not going to read all of it to you because, my God, is it insane to try and read some of that shit if you're not, familiar with how it works. I mean, these are documents that are written in order to be read and then transfer the changes into existing documents, right? So, let me give you a good example. Skipping. Skipping past this section. Oh, where is it? Where is something that actually gives that wording? It's past this. Here it is. Subsection G of section 6695 is amended to read as follows. What that essentially means is, here is what we want you to amend or add to the end of subsection G of section 6695 of the tax code. This is one of the reasons our tax codes are just massive, because you're sitting there and you're amending, you're striking, you're following this template of how to update the tax code itself, and that's what a tax bill is. So it is very important to understand that this bill is not the tax code itself, but rather, for the programmers in the audience, a diff, a series of changes to be made to the tax code, documented by subsection, section, and how that amendment or change is supposed to be made. Whether it's going to be added, amended, stricken, or replacing. Up to 13 million people stand to lose their health insurance because this bill made a big change to the Affordable Care Act. This is very important in order to make sure that the future of healthcare and, national healthcare services are actually affordable enough that people can get them. I mean, I'm an amazing example of what happens when you allow Cuban and Puerto Rican immigrants who are not citizens to have health care at the levels at which they do in states like Florida, in states like California and New York. There's not enough money for the people who need it. And it creates a deadlock where you are trapped in a bureaucracy where people who are essentially feeding off of these illegal immigrants, because it's easier for them as a lawyer to get these illegal immigrants who have no history with the nation these benefits than it is for individuals on their own without the assistance of lawyers, without the ability to get assistance from lawyers, to get those exact same benefits. And then, of course, those lawyers take a percentage of those benefits as their fees instead of charging those immigrants directly. These loopholes have created a system that is nearly impenetrable to actual Americans who need the help, and it, enriches lawyers who take advantage of a system that is not meant to be manipulated, or, well, I guess to a certain degree is meant to be manipulated in this way. Yet Republicans somehow found a way to give giant and permanent tax cuts to corporations like Apple, General Electric, and Goldman Sachs, saving those businesses tens of millions of dollars. Let's face it, tax cuts of the level that they have created, which benefit the poor on a level of, we're talking about 8% reduction in taxes for the poorest money-earning people in the country, 10% for the second bracket up, which is your average lower class. These are going to be enormous, but you don't do that without also giving the same general benefits, 11% at the top tax bracket for corporations as well. We're talking about companies that have, again, lawyers who do nothing but lobby and manipulate the system. And here we are, here's the New York Times trying to condemn the entire thing as if it is entirely a matter of fucking the poor, fucking the poor. No, this isn't fucking the poor. This is benefiting everyone. Yes, even the people I don't want to benefit. But if it's benefiting the people I want to, that's got to be the first time in my lifetime I've heard of it benefiting the people I want to. This is going to free up a lot of strain on an already deadlocked system for the homeless, because the homeless are helped by people within the bottom tax bracket, and with their stress relieved, they're going to be able to work more efficiently. These indirect benefits of tax code adaptations are an important factor that have to be taken into consideration with all of this. But the New York Times doesn't give a fuck. All they give a fuck about is maintaining their power, their manipulative power over the people. Let me get a drink. Because the Senate was rewriting this bill till the last minute, only the deal makers themselves knew what the chamber voted on. Bullshit. I was able to read that bill. I read it last night. I couldn't really sleep. So I took the time to read this bill once the PDF hit the Senate.gov webpage. And you know what? I'm pretty sure the senators who give a fuck, especially the ones who are the most important swing voters, those 3 or 4 Republicans and 1 or 2 Democrats who made up the difference that landed us at a 51-49 split, absolutely read this shit while they had the time. It's only 79 pages, and most of it is dense, repetitious, form, this is exactly how this shit is worded. You can skim through this shit and get most of the information you need if you're used to reading these kinds of documents. Due diligence tax preparer requirement with respect to head of household filing status. This is a phrase you will find in the tax code. So if you're familiar with the tax code, you understand what that means, and that you can just jump directly to section 6695 subsection G and tell what the difference therein is. Of course, then of course, due diligence tax preparer requirement with respect to head of household filing status. is essentially a very complex way of saying if you're the head of household, you have to know what your tax bracket is. You have to put in the effort, and you know, it's very complex shit that really is really simple when you get down to reading into it. The votes for the bill by Susan Collins of Maine and John McCain and Jeff Flake of Arizona were particularly disheartening. These, of course, are the 4 swing votes. 3 of the 4 swing votes, which I was referring to before. Miss Collins, who helped sink an effort to effectively repeal the ACA in September, blithely voted for a tax bill that will leave a gaping hole in that law by repealing its requirement that most people have insurance or pay a penalty. Do you see what they're saying here? Repealing its requirements that people have insurance or pay a penalty. Now I'm not going to be punished for not having insurance. And yet the New York Times is pissed that Miss Collins voted on something that will take away a debt that I have to the government because I don't have insurance. Utter fucking madness. She traded away her vote for an inadequate deduction for property taxes and empty promises from Mr. Trump and the Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell, that they would help shore up the ACA, which they have repeatedly tried to sabotage. They haven't tried to sabotage it. They've tried to, in the words that have now become almost ignored, repeal and replace it with something simplified and direct. Mr. McCain, who had previously voted against tax cuts in the Bush era because they were heavily tilted in favor of the rich rather than the middle class, seemed unconcerned that this bill was even worse in that regard. Bullshit. It's not worse in that regard. It's infinitely better. Everyone's getting tax cuts. Everyone across the board is getting about a 10%, an 8 to 10% tax cut. That's huge. That is going to free up so much money in our economy that a $1.4 trillion deficit is going to be directly countered by taxes paid in, not to mention it's going to directly invest into our market, which is doing the best it's ever been. Mind you, it's doing the best it's ever been due to monopolization of companies like Verizon, AT&T, Time Warner, Google, Amazon, the other fucking giants that I spend so much time talking about. However, while we're in this position, we might as well pass those benefits on through tax cuts to the middle and lower class, which we absolutely are. Then there's Mr. Flake, who has spoken powerfully against Mr. Trump and who is not seeking re-election. He folded on the basis of vague assurances about protecting the dreamers, young undocumented immigrants brought to the country as children. Yes, there is still dreamer protection. But those dreamer protections do no longer extend to the parents of those dreamers, which is why the anchor baby problem was such a concern for Republicans back 4 years ago, 5 years ago now. For his part, Mr. Trump has repeatedly asserted with a straight face that this tax bill would hurt him. In fact, it will give him and his family a windfall. Bullshit. One, he's no longer a part of the Trump Corporation. His family absolutely is going to benefit from this, but it's not going to benefit him whatsoever. If anything, he is eligible for back taxes on this. That's because the Senate bill will provide a generous tax break for income that people earn through limited liability corporations, partnerships, and so-called pass-through businesses. That is the most underhanded thing in the fucking world. Limited liability corporations, partnerships, and pass-through businesses are small businesses. Yes, they're absolutely manipulated by large businesses in every possible way. But if we don't keep those manipulable services, such as limited liability incorporation and joint partnerships available, we can't have small businesses. So they're trying to take what will absolutely benefit the middle class in creating small businesses and paint it as a sick... I'm just disgusted by the way the New York Times presents this. And it's not just that. I mean, PolitiFact actually had to say something fucking honest. Now, this... Shush, Trump. We're not listening to you right now. PolitiFact had to lose its shit, and yet they contradict themselves multiple times in this article. So America's tax code is a dysfunctional mess, Trump said in a speech in St. Charles, Missouri, on November 29, 2017. The current system has cost our nations millions of Americans' jobs, trillions and trillions of dollars, and billions of hours wasted on paperwork and compliance. Absolutely true, especially through the very corrupt licensing system that keeps popping up over and over, putting money in essentially bill makers, lawmakers' pockets, and taking it away from the people who are working their ass off to make a small business. It is riddled with loopholes that let some special interests, including myself, in all fairness. This is going to cost me a fortune, this thing. Believe me. Believe me, this is not good for me. And if you go through the bill, you actually find that this does close a number of loopholes. It doesn't close all of them, because it's nearly impossible to close all of them. The very structure of our tax code and business system is that we have different scales of liability, different scales of taxing, and large companies are completely free to have a third party or even independentized first party go out and create another company under a larger umbrella with the support of the larger umbrella company. Take Alphabet Inc. and Google, for example, and take advantage of these very simple tax limitations. But if we didn't do that, we would just be strangling our middle class, and we would not see any competition from small business. You know how I know that? I've lived the last 8 years trying very hard to create small businesses. When we asked the White House for additional details about how the law would hurt Trump, they cited the repeal of the state and local tax deductions, which allow taxpayers to deduct some or all of their state and local tax burden from their federal tax income. As a wealthy resident of New York City, Trump would likely face high state and local rates. So there's a contradiction directly to them saying this is false. The White House also cited anti-abuse provisions within the changes being made to the pass-through tax rates for business income that is taxed within individual tax filings. And that's, of course, relating to the individualized corporation forming that I was talking about before. Sorry about that, stem bolt. Sometimes every time I go in there and I tell YouTube I don't want to fucking, block or moderate anything, and it still fucking does it. I'm sorry. I'm just doing my best to catch whenever that happens and just allow whenever that happens. So I apologize if that happens to you. Trump may indeed get hit by some of the tax bill's specific provisions, but independent analyses of the bill's potential impact on his own tax situation agree that, after all is said and done, he should come out far ahead compared to the status quo. Well, yes, everyone's going to come out ahead because everyone is getting an 8 to 10% reduction in taxes. I find it extremely important that you go through and read this tax bill yourself, because while Trump has done a number of things that I have questions with, while Trump is a very controversial figure left, right, and center, this tax bill is perhaps the most honest he has been, with his promises from his campaign. And as someone who voted for Donald Trump, I'm extremely proud of what I've seen in this 479-page tax bill. This is amazing. And the benefits that we are going to find far, far outweigh the risks that we're going to see. Not to mention, those risks are still open to be addressed directly when it comes especially to matters that have been described as draining the swamp. So while it's not perfect, while, yes, AT&T, Apple, Verizon, Google, these enormous monopolistic companies are going to have grand benefits, they're not the only ones. Even the person who gives me a place to live right now, the person that has given me a place to rent is going to find themselves in a much more secure financial situation come tax day, because they're going to pay much lower in taxes, and they're going to see much greater benefits in their tax returns. There's a couple more articles in the description box relating to this, specifically a non-opinion article from the New York Times, which is still remarkably opinionated, but covers a lot of the specific details relating to Paul Ryan's comments on the matter, Mitch McConnell's comments on the matter, Chuck Schumer's comments on the matter, and so many more. And I do recommend you go through and read those for yourself. Make up your own mind in understanding just what's happening. Because I can tell you over and over that you're getting a 10% tax cut, when the fact of the matter is you might just be getting, 7% if you are only just barely above $19,000, right? There are, very specific considerations to take into account when it comes to a tax bill, since tax bills are based on taxable income above certain amounts. But go through, find out what you're going to be paying in taxes. Do the math for yourself. I suspect you're going to be remarkably surprised at what kind of benefit you're going to be finding yourself from the passage of this bill. And unfortunately, I am not doing well today. I'm in a lot of fucking pain. So we're going to be finishing with two more stories. One's actually kind of silly. This story made me think of South Park and just made me laugh my little ass off. But apparently, the ricin problem is coming out of a retirement community. Fucking hilarious, if you ask me. Police. Woman made ricin, tested it on neighbors at retirement community. Doesn't this sound like something directly out of an episode of South Park? An episode of South Park that aired like a month ago? Burlington, Virginia. A resident of a Vermont retirement community made ricin and tested the deadly toxin on her neighbors by putting it on their food or in beverages over a period of weeks, investigators said. Betty Miller, 70, told an FBI agent that she wanted to injure herself and was testing the poison's effectiveness on other residents at the Wake Robin Senior Living Facility in Shelburne, according to a criminal complaint filed in federal court on Thursday. Police were called to Wake Robin on Tuesday after Miller told healthcare providers she had manufactured the ricin and placed it on other residents' food and beverages. The agent said in the complaint. No residents reported symptoms of ricin poisoning, he said. The FBI and the Vermont Department of Health interviewed Miller on Tuesday evening at the University of Vermont Medical Center, federal law enforcement authorities said in a statement. Skipping down a bit. We have received assurances from the Vermont Department of Health and the FBI that no one's health is at risk, McKee said in a statement. The resident of the apartment in question is now involved with the criminal justice system and will not be returning to Wake Robin. The health department said Friday that it became aware of one person who likely became ill with ricin poisoning, but said no one is currently ill with ricin poisoning. The reason I found this story absolutely hilarious, and it's kind of a dark comedy, if I'm being completely honest with you, is how closely related this is to the South Park story, but there is a deeper message to be addressed here, to be considered here. And that is that, well, the situation is so dire for so many people in the United States right now that 70-year-old women are trying to kill themselves with ricin made with castor beans. This is, it's insane. You would think this is something that Matt Stone and Trey Parker would write, but no. This is absolutely something that has happened, is being investigated. And for those who don't know, ricin, kind of closely related to anthrax. If ingested, it can cause vomiting, diarrhea, hallucinations, seizures, and death if you've taken too much, and too much being in the ballpark of 50 to 60 beans worth of harvested rice in. The harvesting process will boil it down to like 2 to 3 tablespoons, up to 4 to 5 tablespoons if you do it completely accurately. However, the strength using castor beans or even apple seeds is not going to be nearly as strong as the synthetics made in labs. But here we are with a huge drug epidemic in the United States, in part caused by the free availability of opiates and other very controlled substances in retirement homes being distributed by people who are not licensed to distribute these drugs, or barely licensed to distribute these drugs, and then being resold by the elderly who are not, being able to benefit from Social Security in the first place because their Social Security has been cut to make room for, immigrants. And I know, I sound like a fucking racist. I might as well be. Doesn't fucking matter if I am or not, because here we have the elderly of America trying to kill themselves with ricin, trying to kill each other with ricin. I can't stop thinking about this as just a truly darkly hilarious situation. But I wanted to bring up something of that dark hilarity because the last subject I have for you guys today is a lot less funny. A lot of you know that there's two things that really do set me off, that really do upset me, right? And that would be the mistreatment of children, as in exploitation of children. If you've been watching recently, you've seen how the adpocalypse and the coming out of child exploitative videos really set me off. And of course also the exploitation and abuse of men. And this story, a story that has been developing over the last week, really, really upset me, because this is exactly the kind of subject about men's rights that upsets me more than anything else. This is the story, of course, of Mariah Woods, a 3-year-old girl who went missing between 1 and 5 a.m. from her mother's home, and across the last week has been the subject of search and rescue operations, which collected up to 730 people involved in the search in the North Carolina area, to no results. But today, the boyfriend of the mother of Mariah Woods was arrested. Mariah Woods' mother's live-in boyfriend is arrested and charged with her death 5 days after saying he was the last to see the 3-year-old alive. But police have not found her body. The live-in boyfriend of Mariah Woods' mother has been arrested in connection with the missing 3-year-old's death. In the early hours of Saturday morning, Earl Kimry, 32, was arrested for concealing a death and obstruction of justice, of which there's no evidence he's actually involved whatsoever. In fact, as we go through this, you're going to find there's a whole lot of no evidence to be seen whatso-fucking-ever. Police in Jacksonville, North Carolina, have not found Mariah's body, but they now believe she is dead. The toddler has been missing since 6 a.m. on Monday. Kimry and her mother, Christy Woods, told police that he was the last to have seen her around midnight on Saturday. They said he told her to go back to bed, and that was when they went to her bed, and that when they went to her bedroom the next day, she was gone. In the early hours of Saturday, Kimry was brought before a magistrate to be charged with concealing a death, obstruction of justice, burglary, larceny, and possession of stolen property. I want you to take a moment and think about those charges, because that is quite the fucking spread, don't you think? As a person who has been studying into a lot of cases that are related to men's rights, this absolutely disgusts me, because this is the kind of thing they do when they have no evidence, but they need to force a confession out of someone. They throw the book at them. They use every possible related charge in order to create such a level of intimidation in the arrested individual that they have no choice but to either keep their fucking mouth shut or admit to something they didn't do. And I'm not saying he did it. I'm not saying he didn't do it. But what I'm saying is, there's a lot more to this that no one is letting on. His arrest warrant does not explicitly say that he has killed her, but alleges that he moved her lifeless body when he knew her death was not from natural causes. He is now being held in county jail on a bond of $1,010,000. Days ago, the girl's biological father, Alex Woods, said he did not believe Kimri's story that Mariah was abducted by a stranger. And when you go through and read other articles, it's not that he doesn't believe Kimri, because it's not Kimri's story. The mother is the one who continually reports and thinks that the child was abducted by a stranger. And I'm going to get it further into that as we get through the two articles I'm covering. Woods, who has not seen her for a year, despite claiming to have visitation rights, remember that fact, a father with visitation rights who still hasn't seen his daughter in a year, said he has been trying to get Mariah out of the home, but that he could not afford a lawyer. In a statement in the early hours of Saturday, the Onslow County Sheriff's Office said they now firmly believe that Mariah is dead, but they do not know where her body is. And if, for those of you who understand law, habeas corpus, which means the body of the crime, kind of requires the body in order to make a proper murder charge, which is the entire reason why this concealing a death, obstruction of justice, burglary, larceny, and possession of stolen property is fucking insane. Because there's not one accusation of murder in there, but everything that could be possibly related to the murder if he had anything to do with it. Concealing a death, obstruction of justice, burglary and larceny. This is, I mean, we are getting into a level of police abuse that just outright disgusts me. And it's entirely because he really was the only man around who could be accused. At this time, the location of Mariah is unknown. Searchers will now shift to a recovery process, they said. Kimri, who said he was the last person to see Mariah alive on Monday night. Wait, did I already read this? No, they're just repeating themselves. God damn it, Daily Mail. He has a long criminal history, which includes charges for larceny, assault, threats to the government, and being drunk and disorderly. These charges date back to 2002. They stretch over several counties and 2 states. Social Services would not confirm on Friday whether they had ever investigated Kimri or the home where Mariah was living. A spokesman refused when asked by the Daily Mail if they had ever been reported concerns about the family, and said the information was confidential, which technically it is. And, you know, I wouldn't give it to a fucking international newspaper if I was doing it. However, this is the kind of information I've been trying to dig up. And as you'll find, as we go through the next article, which is basically a fucking repeat of this article, give or take information, no one is talking at all. Items of interest which the FBI sent to its lab in Quantico earlier this week have still not been revealed. They were sent straight to the FBI's base in Virginia for testing on Wednesday afternoon. It has been 5 days since the little girl vanished from her home in the dead of night. Earlier this week, Maria's biological father, who had not seen her for more than a year, said he did not believe she was abducted. Someone just walked right in there, grabbed a 3-year-old out of the bed, and she didn't cry? She didn't scream? Nobody heard anything? 4 people in the house, 2 adults and 2 kids. Someone just comes up and snatches a baby and walks out, Alex Wood says. He added that he had been trying to win sole custody of Mariah and her older brothers, but he could not afford a lawyer. Christy, who this week disabled her Facebook account after posting the missing persons appeal for her daughter, claimed that Mariah was taken by a stranger. See, it wasn't Kimli, but rather Christy who made the claim that she was taken by a stranger. And yet, all of these news outlets want to put the direct blame onto Kimli, Earl Kimli, the boyfriend, the live-in boyfriend. I love her, I'll do anything I can, whatever you want, please bring her back safe and sound, she's my baby, she's my everything. Christy called the police to report her missing on Monday at 6 a.m. She claimed she had not been seen since midnight when she checked on her, and that her boyfriend Earl was the last person to see Mariah alive. She claimed she saw her at 1 a.m. He saw her at 1 a.m. and told her to go back to bed. At some point in the 5 hours between then, she said someone abducted the child, who has a walking impediment, from her bedroom. And now we're going to go to the WRAL local news story about the subject, just to give you a good example of what everyone is talking about and how much repetition of the absolutely nothing there is in this story. The Onslow County Sheriff's Office and the FBI made an arrest late Friday in connection to the disappearance of Mariah K. Woods, missing since Monday. They charged 32-year-old Earl Kimry with concealing a death, amongst other charges, although Mariah has not been found. Kimry, who was in the Onslow County Detention Center on a $1 million bond, faces charges of concealing a death, obstruction of justice, second-degree burglary, larceny, and possession of stolen property. Family members said Kimry lived in the same home with Mariah and her mother. Photos on Facebook show the pair together with Mariah. The arrest warrant issued for Kimry said he obstructed justice by removing Mariah Wood's body from the scene of her death and did conceal Mariah Wood's death and body, knowing that Mariah Woods died from unnatural causes. The defendant acted with deceit and intent to fraud, despite the fact that there is no evidence whatsoever connecting him, or anyone for this matter, to the crime. Kimry secretly disposed of the child's body, the warrant said. Which is all, bullshit at this point. In a statement issued just before 2:30 a.m. on Saturday, the Sheriff's Office said that information gathered in the search for Mariah led authorities to believe she is dead, although no body has been recovered. At this time, the location of Mariah is unknown. Mariah's mother told the Onslow County Sheriff's Office that she last saw her daughter at her family home on Sunday night when she put her to bed. She called the Sheriff's Office around 6 a.m. Monday to report her missing, and an Amber Alert was issued that day. Since then, professional investigators and volunteers have fanned out across the woods near her home. Neighbors have been asked to search their property, and a dive team has searched the portion of Southwest Creek under U.S. Highway 17. In an update to the media Friday afternoon, Sheriff Hans Miller said that he had a long conversation with one of Mariah's family members and added that they are cooperating. Mariah's parents are divorced, and her father, Alex Woods, said that while his daughter is living with the mother, his week has been like hell, like a nightmare. Alright, why am I bringing all of this up? Why did I even address the idea of men's rights? Because this is absolute bullshit. For one, if you look into domestic violence and criminal acts with relationship to children, especially crippled children, you will often find that despite the mother having direct involvement in the child's death, boyfriends and fathers are very commonly arrested and held and charged very egregiously, entirely for the reason that the mother is considered to be too important in the lives of the children who remain and continue to live. I am horrified to watch and read as the language very carefully leaves out everything about the mother in every news article. Seriously, go search for Mariah Woods and read every news article like I had to. And look how little they talk about the mother, and then read what tiny little bits of details you get both out of the mother and the father. The mother wasn't technically the last person to see her, but the mother was one of the two last people to see the little girl. The father wasn't trying to get Maria away from the boyfriend, but rather trying to get the child away from the mother. Has been trying to get all three kids away from that mother for some time, for the last year. And there is so much evidence pointing to this mother being an absolutely horrific beast of a person with very little love for anything but herself, that I can't help but question the entire situation. Because I've seen too many times, hell, I've seen in the last 2 months alone, the way a psychotic mother will act once her children are threatened by anyone. Because children, to a lot of these women, aren't people. They're extensions of themselves. And when that extension of themselves does not play along, does not give them the validation and benefits which they expect, if they become too difficult, go look into domestic violence Australia, and look how many children have been killed by their mothers in Australia alone. Look into domestic violence against children by mothers in the United States, and how frequently, hell, there were 2 children murdered by their mothers this month alone. And ask yourself, are mothers really the best individuals for these children to be with? I don't think so. I think a family is best when you have the mother and the father. And this is coming from a person who has neither, who has never had either of their parents. So, I mean, take what I have to say with a grain of salt, because this is all opinion and, hearsay, given how little information has been leaked out. But we're also talking about a very, very strong Duluth model state. I am so sick and tired of being given almost no information by the news, by the police, as they try and protect their own asses, instead of letting us understand that what is an utterly disturbing situation is being manipulated to give the public a villain, when in reality the problem is far more in depth. Mariah Woods had problems, but she did not deserve to die. However she died, which we will not get to find out, in the same way that JonBenet Ramsey took for fucking ever to actually get the truth about. And with that, I leave you guys with those thoughts, because I'm not saying that he didn't move the body, but I'm going to tell you this much. A boyfriend has no reason to kill a 3-year-old child. He does have every reason, however, to listen when the mother says, "Go hide the body, oh God, what have I done?" Thank you all so very much for showing up for the show. You guys are all the absolute best. Let me give some shout outs. Thank you to Self-Healing Stem Bolt. A huge thank you to J. Will Series. Thank you to Cube. Ottaking Green Moon, so glad to have you here. Monster Candy, thank you for coming by. Egregious Charles, thank you for coming. Dean Truelove, thank you for showing up. Broadcaster Nananiel, thank you very much. An enormous thank you to Rick Sheck for that, for the, what's it called? The super chat that you sent me. And yeah, thank you all so much. I will see you next week, although I might actually be putting out some more gaming streams on Twitch. And do keep your eyes out, because if I'm able to get this design document completed, I'm definitely going to want to spend some time with you guys programming live the first prototype of this game. And if you want, I can give you just a little bit of information about it, just the littlest hint. If you like games like Hotline Miami or Party Hard, this game is definitely influenced by those. However, I'm going to be going for a slightly more mixed art style, a little bit of a mixed 2D and 3D, with the intent of capturing much more in the art, much more of the interactions between objects, rather than just a straight kill 'em up. I love the idea of setting up interactions between objects and having different objects interact differently depending how you use them and in the order you use them. So definitely be on the lookout for that, because this has kind of become an obsession for me. Ever since I started thinking about this idea, it's been digging into me, and I think you guys are really gonna love this game once it gets started. Bon la cal and bonsoir. You guys are the best. Mwah.